Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting, the Tree Preservation Order Appeals Panel. The purpose of the meeting today is to look at an appeal against 4 trees that are in Whitehouse Green Apartments, or by the apartments. What I'm going to do now is ask the objectors to the matter to be invited to introduce themselves .
Yeah, I'm Kevin Cook. My mother.
Hello, I'm Alan Morris. I'm a resident at 61 Whitehouse Green, and we've faced onto these trees, the back. She's number 55. She's adjacent across the land into us on the same side. Yeah.
Could you let me know the lady's name, please?
Sorry?
The lady's name.
Jean Cook.
Jean Cook.
Of it, these trees, if anything happened, directly outside my window.
Robert, could you bring the microphone down towards your face?
How's that?
That'll be fine. That.
Team of the council.
Thank you. The witnesses may be present throughout the giving of evidence unless one side asks that they're not and the panel agrees to their extension. The chairman will now announce the agenda item being considered and invite the objectors to put their case for appealing against the making of the order and call any witnesses in support of the case. Okay. Right, we have one item on today's agenda. It's Tree Preservation Order 0.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we weren't here to actually give our views. We were here to listen to yours and then respond to them.
Okay.
Just to introduce the report and chronology.
Thank you for that. If no one wants to speak, we'll then go straight into the officer's report.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, a TPO has been served on this property. the TPO should be confirmed or not. Now, we've seen the tree on site. I've certainly seen it. I know you've seen it. You've made site visits. And the trees in question are located within an area of space that is open and readily and highly visible to views into and out of the site from public spaces, i.e. the highway. And something that strikes me about the area, and is perhaps one of the key reasons why it is designated as a conservation area, is the rich arboreal character of the area. I saw on site lots of mature trees of different species. There was a big oak tree in the foreground, a nice willow tree in the foreground as well, framing this view through to the 4 Corsican pines standing in front of the flatted development behind. Now, the purpose of any TPO is to preserve trees that have a significant amenity value. And I certainly saw on site that they do have a significant amenity value, and they do contribute very well to the green, leafy, sylvan appearance of the area. Now, to assess suitability for TPO, as members will be aware, there's a standard process that officers carry out, that they carry out what's called then comes up with a score, and that reads as to whether or not a TPO should be applied or not. Now, in this instance, all 4 of the trees scored the same score. They all scored 16. Now, there's different outcomes of any tempo assessment dependent upon the score. The lowest being, do not serve a TPO. In between, there's potentially merits a TPO, i.e. TPO is defensible, and then at the top end, definitely merits a TPO. Now, a score of 16 brings it into the higher bracket of definitely requires a TPO. So that, together with the obvious and apparent benefits that these trees bring to the character and amenity of the area, from my perspective, does demonstrate that the trees should be protected by way of a TPO, and that should be made permanent. Now, I know we have had objections to this TPO from residents, several objections, the key ones of which have all been addressed in the report. Now, I won't go through them in detail, but they involve issues such as a historic tree survey has been undertaken that identified health defects with a couple of the trees, a sort of fungus. However, site visits at the current time have not shown any evidence of that, and certainly no photographic evidence has been submitted. Other issues have been raised about the trees leaning towards the property and creating a risk to the safety of residents and of the building itself. Issues of lost light have been raised. And again, just general issues relating to potential failure of the trees in the future. Now, I don't intend to go through them all in detail because they're all set out in the report, but ultimately, officer's recommendation is, for the reasons as set out in the report, that the trees are of significant amenity value. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John.
Involved with before this were done, no velvet them. It is possible, because some fungal brackets are most definitely seasonal. It is possible that one or more of the fungal bracket infection in one of these trees, no officer at the council, in my opinion, would be happy. The trees towards the building, yes, there was some lean. The officers didn't note it, particularly on the tempo assessment. In my opinion, if there is a lean towards the building, it's modest and not profound. And in my opinion, as a arboriculturalist, doesn't predict failure. So it's acknowledged that they're not upright, perfectly upright, but they don't appear to be destabilizing and, as I say, predictable for failure with regard to the lean. With regard to loss of light, yes, they are large. With regard to that, they're mature specimens. I can only presume that they've been there. Work could be done to lift the canopy of the trees to assist with people that live lower down, but people closer to the midpoint and the upper point of the canopy of the tree, there's probably very little that can be done to manage the trees to allow for more light. What I wouldn't recommend anybody do is to crown thin the trees to remove branches. That can cause problems even for healthy branches.
Thank you. Do any members of the committee want to ask the officer something? Peter?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. The report by the contractor Mosley, I think it's Tom Mosley, in his survey, he has scored them 2 in his chart here, the 4 trees, and it says any tree works recommended have been allocated a priority category 1 to 5, where 1 is most urgent and 5 as and when funds allow. So I'm just wondering, I know our report is that they're safe and sound as far as it's a bit like selling a car. When it's the wrong type of car or what have you, so the price has dropped. He is representing the residents and we're representing the conservation area as such. Is there any concern about their scoring?
Okay, well, I'll go back to the previous point, Councillor, in that officers can only assess the trees at the time that they're on site and asked to do so. And if fungal brackets aren't there, we can't use invasive tests to test somebody else's property to try and find evidence of an infection internally. It is accepted that this species of trees could have an infection with that fungal species. And I reiterate the point, if at any point in time in the future, irrespective of whether this TPO is confirmed or not, that fungal bracket becomes apparent again, the council would accept the view expressed in the report that it would be hazardous to the long-term health and retention of the trees. And at that point, a 5-day notice could be communicated to the council. I don't think we'd object to it. I can't see any grounds why we would.
This report by Mosley and Sons was visited on Tuesday, the 20th of November, 2018. We're almost 3 years since then. And we have done an inspection, how long ago? Probably. I think it's about 5 months, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's about right. It certainly wasn't in the same time of year as the original report by Mr. Mosley.
So in actual fact, our survey of the trees is more up to date than this one. And therefore, I know you're very experienced, so with regard to trees, because that's what you do permanently. So I would presume, therefore, that they are still in, as you say, a safe condition.
Councillor, it's not the tree officer's role to inspect and survey the trees for the tree owner. If you were doing a full inspection and a survey of a tree which potentially has a fungal infection, you might want to do some further invasive tests to actually demonstrate whether or not there's any internal decay. That's why I'm at pains to stress that if at any future point the fungus is proven to be present and has in fact infected one or more of the trees, the council would not stand in the residents' way or the management company's way in dealing with that, even if that meant the removal of the tree. It is a known fungal species, it is a wood decay fungal species, and it would be a very serious matter for such a large tree. But these things can't be proven by an officer because we can't prove it or disprove it because we're not in a position to test the tree. We can't act as the agent for the residents or the management agent, I'm afraid, councillor.
I know you pay an annual maintenance cost for ground care, etc., window cleaning and what have you. Has there been, to your knowledge, any concern by the insurance company insuring the building? Because I know insurance companies today are very questionable about trees on gardens, and if they're too close, they may void the insurance. Has there been any concern raised?
Back down when time after time. We've also had now, I believe you are shocked. I've lived amongst trees. In fact, I lived in Ceylon for years and I lived on the coconut plantation. I've seen trees come down. I was gardener many years since I've moved in. I've done a lot of gardening there. And you state that there was no disease at the bottom of the tree. You're not going to see it now. He doesn't live with me. And I was going to phone him up and ask him the next day if he'd come and take a photograph to show you. But it wasn't any good because they weren't there.
How long have you been a resident on
I've
site?
been a resident there for 19 years.
So the trees were all there when you came. So they've grown substantially.
The one tree, I don't know whether it fell down. In the months that I was purchasing the property, number one tree, because there was 5, the first tree had to be taken away because of the disease. Apart from that, I don't know about that, but I do know about the other 4.
But they
It's the roof. We've had a new roof put on now, and they have.
you were aware of the trees on
We are,
site
yes, and we were
moved in.
trying at that time to
Yeah.
get something done.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, what I want to do now, I want to ask the people who have come if they want to ask anything of the officers. So if we could go around from this side. Do you want to ask the officers anything, sir?
The only question I've got is really that up until culling quite a lot of the tree. Conservation letter or whatever to fell.
To decide whether or not, based on the works being proposed, whether or not we will impose a tree preservation order. So in effect, if we refuse the application, we issue a tree preservation order. If we approve the works, we don't issue a tree preservation order. So that's really the limitations of the assessment. But we have a council policy that we do not protect trees within our own land owned by ourselves, because we're deemed to be responsible custodians of the land, and we will take all the right precautions, etc., etc. It came to Nikki's attention that this was council-owned land, and therefore we do not issue TPOs on land that's owned by us. Hence, we decided not to make the TPO. However, it soon became apparent that yes, we do own the land, but there are covenants or similar things that exist on the land that do allow the occupiers of the land, so the managing company, etc., to carry out works to trees separate from our consent. So because of that, we decided that the appropriate thing would be to serve a TPO, because the works, i.e. the felling of these trees, isn't works that from an arboricultural perspective we would agree with. So that explains that situation.
John, was Nikki Openshaw a resident of this site? Because that's how I read it. I know she's an officer, or was an officer with the council, but it said it was made following on a request from Nikki Openshaw. So someone must have made the request to her, or did she live there and was concerned about the potential loss of the trees?
No, Nikki Openshaw is or was the case officer dealing with this, but the process I just obviously spoken about, she was responsible for the initial decision, i.e. not to issue a tree preservation order, but because she then became aware that the tenants of the land do have rights to carry out works to trees that normally wouldn't be the case on council-owned land, she then requested that the TPO be made, if that makes sense.
Alan, would you like to say anything?
Yes, TPOs are fine. We're surrounded by hundreds of trees. It's a lovely area to live. But my concern, if you, I don't know whether you're aware that a few weeks ago, a huge oak tree, the other side of our block, just fell with no warning. It just fell. Luckily, the building was safe. It fell the other way. Had anybody been parked under that tree or sat in the car under that tree, they wouldn't be here today. And when we looked at the, as it came, there's a huge root structure, and these roots were totally rotten. Now, there's never been any sign of mushrooms around that tree. It was up 1 minute and crashed down the next. There was nothing holding that tree down, and it was a huge oak tree. And obviously that's heightened our concerns about these 4 pine trees. And it's not just, we seem to be talking about rot and all the rest of it. We live in fear of high winds bringing these down. And I'd like the council to take into consideration that it's not just tree preservation we're talking about here, it's human beings living in fear and the worry of if these things come down, because it's going to take down the building and it's going to kill somebody. And this oak tree, and if you want to come and have a look, you can see where the root structure was. It's all been taken away now. That's heightened our concerns of these trees. I'm not, obviously I'm interested, and so is everybody else, in whether they've got a fungus, which could, but there is a thing called high winds and storms. And when you see these things coming towards your property, it does get a bit scary, particularly some of the branches, which are very close. And as Bob will tell you, so our concern is preserving trees more important than preserving human life and standard of living and quality of life, with the threat of these 4 trees. The fact that, as Jean said, some years ago, one had to come down for whatever reason. So I'll rest my case. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Alan. Do any of the officers want to reply to that?
Okay, so I'll come back to a point I made earlier. It is accepted by the council that all large trees have a certain amount of risk associated with them, and that there are pros and cons of residing in close proximity to large trees. I mean, everybody would accept that, I think. With regard to the tree that previously failed, it doesn't necessarily follow, and presumably a number of years have passed since that tree failed, the one in the same group of pines, not the oak, on the other side of the building. If it's been a period of time since that happened, and no other report has found anything wrong with the trees other than the report dated November 2018, then I come back to my point. If the TPO is made, the council will not wish and will not seek to retain a tree which is likely to be hazardous. We do think that people's lives are more valuable than trees, and we wouldn't seek to retain a tree until it collapsed. So, but all we were asking for is further evidence that the trees are indeed infected with the fungus, which the report states was seen. Now, the report is dated 2018. A number of years have passed since then. If the fungus is in the tree, it will produce another fungal fruiting body at some point in time, presumably in the late autumn winter period like it did previously. And it should be possible for a tree professional to identify that as and when it appears. And if it is identified and it is proven to be the fungus which the report states, then the council would not seek to force the retention of the tree, even if it was covered by a TPO. With regard to the oak tree on the other side of the property, yes, some trees do get root-related disease, and there doesn't necessarily follow that you see canopy symptoms to pre-warn anyone that such a situation occurs. All I can say is that there are fungal species that attack oaks, there are fungal species that specialize in pines, and there are general fungal species that can do either. This particular fungus that's been talked about, velvet fungus, it shouldn't be the same fungus that attacked the oak tree, and therefore the two things should be seen as separate incidents. I accept the point made, the broader point about people's anxiety and wish to have a pleasant and stress-free life. But equally, I come back to my point. It only needs to be demonstrated that the trees have indeed got a serious infection, and nobody will prevent the work from progressing. It's been, you know, since November 2018, no work has been done to the trees yet that I can appreciably note. So I can only assume that despite the fact it was given a category 2 in a report, the management agency has decided it didn't need to intervene in the intervening years.
Thank you. Before I ask Mr Ingram to come in, Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you just confirm for me, whose responsibility is it then to check these trees?
Okay, I'm not a legal expert, so Santok may be able to correct me on this point. It may be described in the terms of the lease. If the council is a freeholder of the site, then presumably it may be actually described in detail in the actual lease agreement between the freeholder and the management agency. I would presume, since the forestry team at the council has never been acting as the advocates for the site before, that it will be the management company on behalf of the residents that has that legal responsibility.
That's right. We haven't got the papers here, but that's the assumption. Management company.
Mr Ingram.
Are we to assume then that at the moment you cannot categorically say whether it's actually infected or not? Right? Can you say categorically it has got it or it hasn't?
No, I can't make that determination and that decision because I have not been in a position to investigate the tree to try and determine whether or not there is any internal decay. So no, I'm not in a position to say one way or the other. All I'm in a position to say is that at the time that the tempo assessment was done,
Right.
and at the time that I saw the tree last week, there was no direct evidence of the fungal brackets of the species, which is supposed to have infected the tree. That's all I can say.
Okay. I've lived there for 7 years, right? One tree was taken down and I was told it was the same type of tree. And also that this fungal infection is why it was cut down. And so-called experts tell me that this thing can be transmitted from tree to tree, right? I love where I live. I've got no problem with light. I've got no problem with squirrels or animals or anything. It is absolutely a gorgeous place to live. Nowhere else are the flats do they have such a lovely outlook, right? Let's get that straight. And I don't think anybody else has, well, I know some people have objections about light and things like that. I personally don't. And I'm the one that stands to be hit by the tree first because I live on the top, right? So my problem is not with anything. It's the fact that we want to know whether we're in danger or not. And you've just stated you don't know. So we don't know. So because one tree was cut down many years ago that did have the fungal, and I'm told it could reach it across, then somebody comes along, and I don't know whether this is something to do with the council or not, but every single tree on there is numbered. Yeah? Is that the council's work?
Not as far as I'm aware. I don't think we've ever had any direct managerial responsibility for the site, I'm afraid.
All right. Every single tree is numbered, right? And the guy came round and he gave us a very detailed what we should and shouldn't do. And when it came to these 4 particular trees, it said numbers 1 and 2, if you like, should come down, should be felled. And this is to be paid for from our money, right? Anyway, so we don't want to incur things that don't need to be done, yeah? But at the same time, you must realise that you don't know whether it's got it or not. We don't know when the tree's coming down. So we've got people who are 80 and 90 living in the fear that the tree's going to come down. Now, surely, if we can't prove it one way or the other, the safest thing would be to either have it injected or whatever you have to do to find out whether the fungal is there. Because I've actually seen this fungal growing on the base of the first tree. And it's like, it's not like your average, it's just a fungal growing out the side of the tree. In fact, there are pictures of it in some of the reports. So therefore, there's some evidence. Is it possible that it could spread to the next tree?
The action of fungus in trees is not easy to predict. That is a fair point to get across. It is possible, if you've got trees of the same species in close proximity to each other, that there could be a natural root graft, i.e. their roots could literally join to make one super root system. That is theoretically possible, but not necessarily easy to predict one way or the other. So that possibility does exist if it was a root-related infection, yes. With regard to the other trees, establishing whether or not they are infected, it can be done. It really is easy to do. All they need to do is drill test the tree with a piece of equipment called a resistograph, or even just use an increment borer, which is literally just a large drill that you can corkscrew into a tree. If those methods have been used by an agent acting on behalf of the management company that actually manages the site and has the responsibility to reassure the residents there, then that could be established one way or the other. But as I say, the officers of the council are not in the position to carry out invasive investigations of property which we're not directly responsible for. We can't do that.
Yet you are able to put a tree preservation order which stops us doing certain things that other people, certain experts have said are required.
I'll come back to my previous point. If at any point in time the trees are proven to have the fungus, which the report states they have, the council would not seek to retain the trees or stop any work that was necessary to make the tree safe. Even
Well,
if that meant felling
what
the
happens
trees.
if the tree fell over before the spore showed up because the infection was so bad inside the tree, which you've already said you can't know one way or the other, and the thing falls over? I don't know, as you know, I personally love the trees, right? They live outside, the squirrels, I quite enjoy it, yeah? But the same thing is, I think what the people are worried about is not cutting it down.
Oh, sorry.
It's the fact that, you know, they're fearful of it. I don't think a tree preservation order, well, trees are then to be managed. They have a lifetime. What is the lifetime of a Corsican pine?
Could I just come in at this point? Because I think the tree officer has mentioned this 3 times, that if the TPO, if it is confirmed, would not seek to retain the trees that can be proven to be infected with any known wood decay. If the TPO is confirmed, but a fungal bracket of this species was subsequently noted, observed or photographed on any of the 4 pine trees, then the council would not seek to prevent any tree being made safe, even if this meant felling. That's in order to prevent any serious incident. So I just want that point to be made absolutely clear.
Yeah, but at the moment, right, if we said, right, we want to cut the first 2 trees down as a safety feature because we're so concerned, the TPO would stop it, yes?
No, it wouldn't.
Well, in other words, and if we said, you've got a TPO, but we're going to chop these 4 trees down, you wouldn't object, even though you've got a TPO?
I think at this point, what we need to do is take some legal advice, and we could do that.
Chairman, I think you've heard the debate. You've heard the objectors, what the objections are. You've had responses to that. And I think the debate we're going into is not for today's panel hearing, but it's for an application for to chop or lop, assuming the TPO is upheld. I think now then, if you've heard from both sides, you can now either seek legal advice and have a debate, and then obviously everyone comes back in public, you give your decision.
I think we'll go to advice if we can, please. The officers. Go on then. Okay.
Right, the green light. On Tom Mosley's list of trees, and they're all numbered as the gentleman has just said, 0645 and 0646. 0645 says some dead wood, blackened butt rot fungus at base, Philius schnitzel or something like that. It's easy to say schnitzel, isn't it? Venus schnitzel. And 0646, some crown deadwood, blackened but rot fungus at base, exudes on trunk. Both of those say fell. Now, it doesn't say fell or any major concerns on 0643 and 0644.
Yeah.
Now, I presume from what I've heard from the gentleman, and I'm sorry with names, you sir, are you more concerned with 0645 and 0646.
I'm concerned not with 0643 or 0644. 0645 was said it should be felled. 0646 said it was felled. I actually live opposite 643, which is the least affected. And if I am assured that it's safe, I'd rather watch the squirrels and have the tree than have it cut down. But the thing is, are they safe? That's all we're worried about.
Well, I don't think in actual fact the report from Moseley is saying that they are not safe. And we're also saying that as far as they're aware, they are safe trees. This is a very difficult one, and I understand where you and your fellow residents are concerned about that. But we have got to make a decision on the information that has been given to us both from the council or by the independent consultant. So I think the chairman is right that we need to discuss this privately so that we can make a decision.
Because it could be that somebody just wanted to earn some money chopping 2 trees down.
Well, that's true.
We don't know.
You wanted to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I did ask the question earlier on, who is responsible for the management of the trees, and it's the management company. So to my mind, it's the management company that should be responsible for finding out if the trees are safe or not. It's not an issue for the council. I think that's correct.
Yes, for today's purposes, yes. Now, if the management company, whoever's responsible, wants to cut or take down the tree because it's dangerous or diseased, the management company will obtain tree expert evidence for our TPO officers to consider.
Yeah, so they will have to establish whether the tree is safe or not. It's not for our officers to go and do the invasive drilling and everything else, because it's not the responsibility of the council. It is the responsibility of the management company. So if the management company can provide this evidence, then the council will have no objection at all to felling the trees. That's how I understand this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I'm going to take one more question from the gentleman at the end.
It's really about this ownership issue that I learned from what Mr. Hallam said about the fact that the TPO was issued because it wasn't Solihull land. And then we've realised then that it is actually Solihull land, and the gentleman there said it on the assumption that the management company are in charge. Have we proved that Solihull do not own that land from the Bird family? Or are we, are we actually doing all this work when actually it all belongs to Solihull anyway? Solihull Council, I believe.
Yeah, certainly the necessary checks have taken place that do satisfy us that Solihull Council is the freeholder, but the leaseholder has rights beyond what Solihull Council would have in terms of insisting that all trees are protected and remain on site from a land ownership perspective, not from a TPO consent perspective. So notwithstanding that it's owned by the council, that itself doesn't restrict works that can be carried out by the leaseholder and the management company on those trees, hence the request for a TPO.
Thank you. At this point, I want to take some legal advice. So could members of the public wait outside and I'll call you back in later? And the officers, please, as well.